pleasure to introduce Victoria Moran today. Victoria is a 30-year vegan and the author of 11 books, including Main Street Vegan, which has been praised by Russell Simmons, Ellen DeGeneres, Bill Clinton, and even pre-vegan Michael Moore, who says, finally, a book that's not preaching to the vegan choir, but to the people in the pews and the ones who can't fit in the pews. Victoria is an obesity survivor, a certified holistic health counselor, host of the weekly Main Street Vegan radio show and podcast, and founder of Main Street Vegan Academy, which is training vegan lifestyle coaches. She's appeared twice on Oprah, as well as on Good Morning America, The Today Show, and All Things Considered. Please join me in welcoming Victoria Moran.
I love the Midwest because I am from Kansas City, Missouri, and you can't get more middle than that. I remember when my parents took me to Miami when I was 6 years old and I saw the ocean for the first time. It's like, where have you been keeping this? Now I know you guys have got lakes and things like that. In fact, I know that really well because I used to live in Wisconsin. I did. Yeah, I lived in Milwaukee. Anybody here from Milwaukee? Yahoo! Okay. Oh my goodness, then I better be good. I lived on our avenue, kind of between the lake and the food co-op. So it was very convenient. Wow, that was such a long time ago. And to tell you how long it's been since I was in your fair city of Madison, when I was here, I heard about a guy who was starting a political group that he wanted to call Vegans for Reagan. Now, it didn't much get off the ground because he was pretty much the only member. But things have changed. Now we know how to pronounce the word. And in those days, you see, we saw veganism, vegetarianism, eating whole foods, caring about animals as this kind of fringy movement. It was sort of something that got left over after the peace demonstrations of the 60s and the 70s and all that sort of thing. It was kind of like Haight-Ashbury with some pot sprinkled on it. And it was there. And those of us who were really committed to this way of life and this way of eating at that time believed that off in the far wondrous future, we would one day convert all the lefties. We would get the Unitarians. We would get the NPR listeners. We would get all the leftover hippies. But you know what? That's not what's happened. This really has become maybe not the biggest mass movement out there yet, but definitely a mass movement. It has become a Main Street movement. When people say to me, what celebrity would you most like to turn vegan? I say Rush Limbaugh. I believe that Mr. Limbaugh could probably use this for his own health, but he also has a following of a lot of people who maybe haven't looked in this direction because they thought that you had to be Michael Moore to look in this direction. So I'm going to tell you the Michael Moore story for how he endorsed the book and all that, because it's a really good story. I happen to believe that we are here doing God's work. And if you don't want the word God, just use another one. We are here doing something important, something profound, something that needs to be done to save the lives of billions of innocent animals, to save the lives of human beings, to keep our country from going bankrupt because of medical care costs that they call health care costs. It doesn't have anything to do with health. It has to do with keeping people alive who wouldn't even be sick if they knew what we're learning here today. So because it's important, sometimes I think when we get started in doing something in this way, we get a little bit of help. Sometimes we even get a bona fide miracle. So here's what happened. I wanted to write my book, Main Street Vegan. I'd gone to a PETA fundraiser, and they showed these videos. Have y'all seen the videos I'm talking about? I've been seeing videos like this for 40 years. But for some reason, that particular night, my heart was more open than usual. And you've really got to watch that. Because when your heart is really open, chances are you're going to want to do something extraordinary. So what I wanted to do was write her a check for $100,000. Except it would have bounced. So I had to do something else, and I'm in the subway in New York City going home, and just kind of, talking to the higher power, and said, I just want to help. Help me help. And very clearly, the inspiration came to me. Your next book is supposed to be called Main Street Vegan, and it's supposed to have 40 little chapters with a recipe after each one, and it's supposed to be geared to the person that you were in Kansas City and in Wheaton, Illinois, and in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, when you were first making this change. Somebody who didn't know a whole lot of other vegans, but who just wanted to do it anyway. And I said, okay. I always say that when the higher power talks to me. Another time he talked to me and told me that I should go down to Moose Shoes, which is our vegan shoe store in New York City, and he said I should buy these fabulous black over-the-knee ultra suede boots that when you fold over the cuff, it's periwinkle blue. You get all this attention and you get to say, and they're vegan. And so that time, my guardian angel, whoever it was, said, you are almost too old for over-the-knee, ultra-suede boots that roll over with a periwinkle cuff. Almost. Not quite. Act while there is still time. So this particular night, with the Main Street Vegan, I acted. I called my literary agent the next day and said, that book I thought I was going to write, well, we're not writing it. We're writing this other one, and it's called Main Street Vegan. And I could just kind of hear her roll her eyes. You know how that is? You're on a phone. You don't see the person, but the eye rolling is almost audible. But I did the proposal. We found a wonderful publisher in Penguin Books. And the day after everything was signed, the day after they owned the book, my editor said, we're so happy to be working on this with you. There's just one thing. We hate Main Street. I thought, you hate Main Street? That's it. That's the whole point. But as I explained to people who are unfamiliar with the publishing world, it's sort of like giving up a baby for adoption. When it's somebody else's, you might have ideas on how you want this child raised, but it's theirs now. And that book was theirs. And so, okay, trying to be a team player and trying to write this book without a title and not really having that wonderful, lively feeling that I had when it was Main Street Vegan. So I'm walking up the street in New York City, and I happened to see Michael Moore. And the reason that I knew it was him is because he's one of the few people in the world who is so famous, you can recognize him from the back. Now, I knew that he had read one of my earlier books and had liked it because he wrote about it in the Oprah magazine. But not wanting to be a fan or something, I've lived in New York now for 13 years, so I have to pretend to be sophisticated, and believe me, sometimes it is difficult. But I walked up to this woman who was with him, who looked official, and I gave her my business card, and I said, he liked a book that I wrote, so just tell him hello. And went on up the street. And in about 15 seconds, I hear, Victoria! And I look, and there is Michael Moore coming up Broadway after me. And we exchanged some pleasantries, and then he said, we need to talk. We need to talk about food. And we did, several times. And during one of these conversations, I said something about, oh, this book I'm writing, it was supposed to be called Main Street Vegan. And he said, Main Street Vegan? What a perfect title. You see, everybody thinks Hippie Street Vegan or Whole Foods Street Vegan. But Main Street Vegan, it's like to kill a mockingbird. And I said, well, you think so, and I think so, but my editor says Main Street sounds like the Tea Party. He said, oh no, you don't get it. Because it is the Tea Party, and it's the occupiers, and it's everybody else. Because we all want to be mainstream. We all think we're salt of the earth. We all think we're normal. I said, they hate my title. And he said, let me talk to them. I gotta tell you, the second most extraordinary experience of my life, other than having my daughter, which doesn't count, second only to the time when I was 17 and Paul McCartney bought me a drink, second only to that was a three-way call of Michael Moore, my editor, and me. And he is convincing her that I should have that title. And he did. And then she convinced the higher-ups, and then everything fell into place. Now, it's just not every day that somebody with an Academy Award comes into my life to help me get my message out there. So I really believe that when you want to do extraordinary things for the good of all, extraordinary things can happen. Look at the Mad City Veg Fest. This is your third year. This is huge and fabulous. Now, I know this is Madison. The gentleman who picked me up at the airport last night said, well, Madison sometimes gets credit for being more progressive than it is. You know what? Whoever's given you the credit, all over the country, people say things to me like, well, I would like to be vegan, but it's not like I live in some place like Madison. But golly, a lot of you guys live in some place like Madison. Very, very cool. So get out there, do this work. There is nothing like it. So I want to find out who's here and find out who I'm talking to so that I speak to what you want to hear and not just what I want to say. So when I ask you these questions, this is not to see who's cool. This is just to kind of get a sense of who you are, and let us just decide right now, you are all cool. Can we all say, we are all cool? Okay, so who's vegan? Who's like committed vegan, you're gonna be vegan forever? Okay, all right, you're the choir. All right, who is really veg curious, really you're maybe vegetarian leaning vegan? You're pretty darn close, okay? And who is a health conscious omnivore? Okay? And who just eats everything? Okay. All right. You know, I love it when I get, this is actually the first time 2 people have ever raised their hands for that. My record, it's usually lots of honesty up here in Wisconsin. Okay. Well, I want to talk to you today, even though most of you raised your hands to say that you're vegan, as if this were an AA meeting, where they say that the most important person in the room is the newcomer. So I want to talk to everybody, but I want to focus on somebody who's just like, wow, this is new. I hadn't thought about this before. My husband, for instance. I met him 17 years ago, and he was very respectful of my veganism, so we mostly went to ethnic kinds of restaurants, and we'd have Italian or Chinese or Indian, and he always ate vegetarian. And then after about 2 weeks, when it was starting to get serious, he took me to a sports bar. Yes, thank you, whoever booed. And he brought me a present, which ought to be a good thing. But when I opened it up, it was a Kansas City Chiefs sweatshirt, which not only is a Kansas City Chiefs sweatshirt, but it's red. So I knew that if I wore it, people would notice. And it's just not my style. Nothing against football or the Chiefs. It's just like, I didn't start reading all those girly fashion magazines when I was 10 years old to go out in public with something with the word sweat in it. He said, I'd really appreciate it if you'd put this on. And it's like, okay, it's one evening of my life, never gonna see this guy again, I can do it. Menu comes, sports bar. Okay, this is when I'm gonna have my twice annual order of French fries. And let's see, on the side, I guess I will have toast. And he orders this big steak. And he didn't even have the kindness to say, well done. So when it came, it looked more cow-like than it really had to. And I am thinking, once I get through this evening, it is back onto veggie dates. And the next morning he called and he said, I've been thinking. And I thought, oh, me too, buddy. And he said, I've been thinking. I don't think I'm going to eat meat anymore. You see, he wanted to make sure that I didn't do some kind of strange fit right there in the sports bar in my red sweatshirt so everybody would really notice. And so I thought, well, okay, one more date. Today, my husband is a vegan, and he has written a movie, a vegan feature film. It's called Miss Liberty. It's about a cow who escapes from a slaughterhouse. So pray for Miss Liberty. We're in what they call pre-production. That means we don't have any money yet. But Jean Bauer from Farm Sanctuary is our co-executive producer, and so this could happen. But I say that because you just never know how close to making that switch somebody is. My husband told me after that, when I was 12 years old, I went hunting with my cousins, and I killed a rabbit, and it was the most horrible experience. And I vowed at that moment I would never kill any being ever again. But he said I didn't make the connection to the food that I was eating until I met you. So every time somebody meets us, even if they kind of razz you, you're showing them something that's new and something that's lovely and potentially life-saving for them and world-changing for everybody. So what I want to do today is give you an acronym for one of my favorite words in the entire world, and that word is vegan. Now, not everybody likes the word, and there are people in our very movement who don't say the V word. They say plant-based or something else. When I first told my daughter, who's a lifelong vegan, she's all grown up now, she works as a stunt performer, in case anybody says, how could you raise a vegan child to be strong and healthy? She jumps off tall buildings in a single bound. But when I told her the plant-based thing, she said, that sounds like somebody that eats a lot of salad and smokes a lot of dope. So I don't personally say that, and I'll tell you why. It's because when the Vegan Society was founded in England in 1944, can you imagine? Those people were going through World War II, but some of them had such big hearts that they started to think about the animals, and veganism as a movement started in 1960. Now remember, 1960 was the first season of Mad Men. The American Vegan Society was founded. I mean, it was weird to be vegetarian. It was weird to be vegetarian in 1980. But in 1960, Jay and Freya Dinshaw started the American Vegan Society. And they said that veganism was ethically unassailable. Isn't that a beautiful phrase? Ethically unassailable. That just means that in terms of the compassion part of it, you just can't say anything wrong with it. You might want to argue about other parts, but it is ethically unassailable. So after all these people have contributed to this movement and this word, and the world out there finally gets it, the scientific studies that look at different kinds of diets, when one control group is on the vegan diet, they'll say vegan diet right there in the scientific journals. Everybody knows what it means, and so I like to celebrate it. So what I want to do is give you an acronym for the word vegan. I'm going to give you something with each one of those letters to remember and help you move a little bit in this direction if you're just kind of looking this way, or be a prouder, healthier, happier, and more energized vegan if this is something that you've already embraced. So first, V for the word vegan is validate your choices. And what that means is know enough so that you can do it in a way that's healthy, that's lasting, that makes you feel really good about yourself and what you're doing, and that also gives you answers for the questions that you're going to be asked. Is it fair that we have to justify what we eat? No, it's not fair at all. But it's the way it is because we're still tiny in the world. We have doubled our numbers in the past couple of years, but the last survey that was done, which was December of 2011, we were 2.5% of the population. Now that seems tiny unless you think about how many bodies that is. That's a lot of bodies. And because of the 2.5% who are vegan, the 5 to 10% who are vegetarian, and the vast numbers of people who are doing Meatless Monday and vegan till 5 o'clock, and whatever other kind of permutation of leaning in this direction that they're doing, there is food for me to eat at truck stops. It's pretty cool. I'm staying at a Hampton Inn here, and I never eat those hotel breakfasts because they're always so bad. This hotel breakfast, they had real oatmeal made in a crock pot instead of the envelopes, and on the side they had slivered almonds, and they had dried fruit, and then they had fresh fruit. Goodbye, Dr. Greger, most brilliant man on all the internet. Oh, his daily videos, if you don't get them, you will be in for such a treat, nutritionfacts.org. But so they had the oatmeal, the almonds, and then they had beautiful fresh fruit, and they had bananas. Now, they did not have non-dairy milk for the Earl Grey, but you know what? Next year, it's all coming, it's all changing. Took myself to lunch at Chipotle, a fast food restaurant, and not only can you get great vegan food, they even have brown rice. They have brown rice at a place that also has a drive-through. I mean, I didn't think I'd live that long. So things are really changing, but we're still a minority. So we need to know some stuff. So here's the stuff that you need to know. You need to know that when people ask you the most ubiquitous question, where do you get your protein? That what you're not supposed to do is say, well, where do you get your antioxidants and your vitamin C and your fiber? Because those components are not part of animal foods or processed foods, and most people eat a diet comprised primarily of processed foods and animal foods. Now, this is not to say that there aren't people who are not vegetarian eating healthfully, because there is a big health movement in this country, and that is a reason why we need to be really healthy. You know, so many people will say to me, I'm only in this for the animals. Well, good for you, but if you're really in this for the animals, you're going to want to be the best example of healthy veganhood that you possibly can. Because Dr. Oz is not vegan, and he looks good. So I kind of look at that as sort of the bar. If we're going to go out there in the world, we got to be as healthy as Dr. Oz, or a little bit better.
Host of the weekly Main Street Vegan radio show and podcast, and founder of Main Street Vegan Academy, which is training vegan lifestyle coaches. She's appeared twice on Oprah, as well as on Good Morning America, The Today Show, and All Things Considered. Please join me in welcoming Victoria Moran.
I love the Midwest because I am from Kansas City, Missouri, and you can't get more middle than that. I remember when my parents took me to Miami when I was 6 years old and I saw the ocean for the first time. It's like, where have you been keeping this? Now I know you guys have got
honor and pleasure to introduce Victoria Moran today. Victoria is a 30-year vegan and the author of 11 books, including Main Street Vegan, which has been praised by Russell Simmons, Ellen DeGeneres, Bill Clinton, and even pre-vegan Michael Moore, who says, finally, a book that's not preaching to the vegan choir, but to the people in the pews and the ones who can't fit in the pews. Victoria is an obesity survivor, a certified holistic health counselor.
Listeners, we would get all the leftover hippies. But you know what? That's not what's happened. This really has become maybe not the biggest mass movement out there yet, but definitely a mass movement. It has become a Main Street movement. When people say to me, what celebrity would you most like to turn vegan? I say Rush Limbaugh. I believe that Mr. Limbaugh could probably use this for his own health, but he also has a following of a lot of people who maybe haven't looked in this direction because they thought that you had to be Michael Moore to look in this direction. So I'm going to tell you the Michael Moore story for how he endured lakes and things like that. In fact, I know that really well because I used to live in Wisconsin. I did. Yeah, I lived in Milwaukee. Anybody here from Milwaukee? Yahoo! Okay. Oh my goodness, then I better be good. I lived on Our Avenue, kind of between the lake and the food co-op. So it was very convenient. Wow, that was such a long time ago. And to tell you how long it's been since I was in your fair city of Madison, when I was here, I heard about a guy who was starting a political group that he wanted to call Vegans for Reagan. Now, it didn't much get off the ground because he was pretty much the only member. But things have changed. Now we know how to pronounce the word. And in those days, you see, we saw veganism, vegetarianism, eating whole foods, caring about animals as this kind of fringy movement. It was sort of something that got left over after the peace demonstrations of the 60s and the 70s and all that sort of thing. It was kind of like Haight-Ashbury with some pot sprinkled on it. And it was there. And those of us who were really committed to this way of life and this way of eating at that time believed that off in the far wondrous future we would one day convert all the lefties. We would get the Unitarians. We would get the NPR list.